So today our special guest is Shabbir Hassan. So he is an author of Beautiful Passions, which is what this talk is all about, Surah Yusuf. He's also the host of the Untitled podcast, and he is the co-founder of a nikah company which organizes nikah ceremonies and things like that, inshallah. So before we start, we'll have a Quran recitation by Yusuf, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فلما دخلوا على يوسف آوى إليه أبويه وقال ادخلوا مصر إن شاء الله آمنين. ورفع أبويه على العرش وخروا له سجدا وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي. ورفع أبويه على العرش وخروا له سجدا وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي. وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي إن ربي لطيف لما يشاء إنه هو العليم الحكيم. رب قد آتيتني من الملك وعلمتني من تأويل الأحاديث فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت وليي في الدنيا والآخرة
آمين. الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وبعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما وعملا بفضلك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
Inshallah. Welcome everyone. Jazakallah khair. Allah bless you all. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, and we ask him to send his peace and blessings upon his final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we're here to discuss Surah Yusuf, and more specifically, because there's so many angles you can look at. Any surah in the Quran, right? Not just Surah Yusuf, but any surah in the Quran you can look at it from different angles. Now, a surah like Surah Yusuf is very unique, in the sense that I'm going to start off by just giving you a brief background before we get into some of the lessons. It's very unique in the sense that, okay, let's start with the basics. It's the 12th chapter in the Quran, chapter number 12, surah number 12. It consists of 111 verses, so 111 verses. It's quite easy to remember, right? 111. Okay? 111 verses, and obviously it's a story, because we all know parts of the story, okay? And what's interesting about this surah is there are many, let me just say something, there's many surahs in the Quran, and there's many stories within those surahs. Okay, some of the scholars, they say that in fact 1/3, listen to this, 1/3 of the entire Quran consists of stories. Can you imagine that? The rest of the Quran, the other 2/3, is like rulings, ahkam, you know, these types of things. But 1/3 of the Quran, which is a huge amount, consists of stories. So from the very beginning of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, we hear the story of Musa alayhi salam. And Musa alayhi salam's story, if you think about it, even though he's one of the most frequently mentioned prophets in the whole Quran, his story is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. You find bits of it in Surah Taha, bits of it in Surah Al-Shu'ara, bits of it in Surah Al-Naml, and you find his story like spread out throughout the whole Quran. Surah Al-A'raf is another surah as well, right? So bits of his story sporadically spread out throughout the Quran. And likewise with Nuh alayhi salam, with Isa alayhi salam, with Yunus alayhi salam, etc., etc., etc. But Yusuf alayhi salam's story very unique in the sense that you'll find pretty much all of it from beginning to end in one place, and that is in Surah Yusuf. That's what makes it unique, right? And within that, we have to understand why are there stories in the Quran? This is a really important question before we continue, right? Because if 1/3 of the Quran consists of and comprises of stories, there must be a really good reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, decided that such a vast amount of the Quran will consist of stories, right? The main reason is, in fact, Allah gives us the answer at the end of this surah, right? We said there's 111 verses in Surah Yusuf, and right at the very end of the surah, Allah tells us exactly why. He reminds us why we're learning the story in the first place. Because when you're listening to a story, it's very easy sometimes to get lost in the story. And this is why, by the way, let me just tell you something, like stories, people love reading books, especially novels and storybooks, right? Kids love reading books, right? Kids love growing up, bedtime stories. Before they go to sleep, they want to hear a story. Kids love this stuff. Why? It's like entertainment, right? You learn things from it, but it's entertainment. And nowadays we have another version of stories, which is films and Netflix and everything, right? That is literally, it's a story. What you're watching is a story unfolding right in front of you. There's different characters, there's a plot, there's a twist, and so on, okay? And the reason why we enjoy watching these movies and films and Netflix series is because we feel like we can relate to some of the characters. It's interesting, it's gripping. Now, think about story in the Quran. That's not the reason why Allah relates stories in the Quran. It's not just so that we can, find some enjoyment in it, some entertainment. Okay, yeah, that was a great story, or that was a sad story, or that was an emotional story. That's not why why Allah decided to narrate stories in the Quran. He tells us towards the end of the surah, he says, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبَرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Right? لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبَرَةٌ. That in these narratives, in their stories, there is an ibrah. An ibrah means a lesson. There are lessons for who? لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. For those people who have intellect. Because for the rest of the people, when they hear a story like this, I'll give another example, unrelated to the Quran. People love hearing stories about Dajjal, the day of judgment, the end of times. When you're a kid, because I can tell you, I certainly was, I used to get excited when the sheikh or the imam used to be like, we're going to talk about Dajjal today. We used to sit there as if it was like horror movie night, and we used to sit there, the sheikh would talk about Dajjal, like, oh, this is exciting, this is scary, right? And it's really bad, because you look back at it now and you think, what was so exciting about it? Like, this is a serious thing. Yeah, the Prophet used to seek refuge in this. Like, this is the greatest fitna to come. We don't want to be around at that time. It's not exciting at all. But when you're kids, you want to hear these stories, it hypes you up a bit, it pumps you up and so on, right? Now, that's not why Allah tells the stories in the Quran. And most people, when they hear a story like Surah Yusuf, or story of Musa, etc., they're going to find some excitement in it. Okay, the general person is going to be like, oh, that's a nice story, and they're just going to walk away, and it will have no impact on their life whatsoever. But that's not what Allah is saying. Allah is saying, li'ulil albab, for the people of intellect, the people who truly have knowledge and intellect, they will walk away with lessons from the story, not the story itself. Because look, if the story was so important, as in, just knowing the story, then do you know what Allah would have done in the Quran? He would have spoken about what day it took place, exactly where it took. Allah doesn't go into these details. He gives us the details that we need only. So I want to start off with this, that Allah narrates so many stories in the Quran so that we can take lessons from them, number one. And that's obviously what we're here today. I'm not here today to tell you the whole story of Yusuf alayhi salam, because I wouldn't be able to cover 111 verses and go through the whole story. It's pretty much impossible. But I can only pick some lessons, right? Only some lessons. That's point number one. Point number two is, now more specifically, what kind of lessons are we looking at? Because there's so many different approaches and angles to this, right? A story like Surah Yusuf, you can take lessons on, for example, leadership. Because he was, within this story, he becomes a leader at some point. So you can learn leadership lessons from this. You can learn lessons on parenting from this, from his father Yaqub alayhi salam. You can learn lessons about family relationships and ties from this. You can learn lessons on emotional, how to deal with emotions in this story. You can learn lessons from a patient's point of view, right? You can learn life lessons. There's so many different types of lessons, which is why we decided to just focus on spirituality, especially with the month of Ramadan coming up, etc. Right? Spiritual development through Surah Yusuf. Now again, there's only so much that I can say within the short space of time that we have. I can't cover the whole story or the whole surah, but we're going to cover, inshallah, some lessons touching on some parts of the story, not all of it, that we can hopefully practically take away from this evening. Is that okay? Yeah? Bismillah? Okay, cool. So, what are we starting with? It's a very broad one, in fact. Right? It's a very, very broad story, lesson. And we're starting with a very broad, in fact, this is a whole broad area, a field in the Islamic disciplines in and of itself, which is diseases of the heart. Especially when you talk about spirituality or tazkiyah, diseases of the heart. And in particular, we're going to touch on one, which is jealousy, or hasad as it's known as. Right? Now, how does Surah Yusuf begin? So, mashallah, the brother recited the end of the surah, which is the dream. هَذَا تَأْوِيلُ رُؤْيَايَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Right? Yusuf says to his father, this is the reality of the dream that I saw once upon a time. This is the reality, this is the interpretation, this is the manifestation of the dream that I saw once upon a time. What was that dream? That's the question, because that's how the story begins. The story begins with a dream, and it ends with the reality of that dream. So this is, and within that, by the way, I just want to tell you, like how many years were there in between Yusuf alayhi salam seeing that famous dream, that strange dream, and Yusuf alayhi salam's dream actually coming true? There's a difference of opinion, because the Quran doesn't tell us exactly when it happened, so the scholars interpret, and some of the scholars, they say, within that time, there's about 40 years that had passed. It's not a joke, it's not weeks or months or just a couple of years. Around 40 years have passed. Like Yusuf alayhi salam, at the beginning of the story, he's a young boy. Literally, some scholars say 7, 8 years old. And by the end of the story, he's in his 40s, 50s perhaps. He's a grown man, right? So you can understand how much time has gone, right, in between him seeing the dream. So he sees the dream at the beginning of the story. We all know the famous dream. And how many stars did he see in his dream? Quick test for you guys. How many stars did he see in his dream?
11.
Good. إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ أَحَدَ عَشْرَ كَوْكَبًا. So 11 stars. What else? Shams. Yeah, the sun and the moon doing what? رَأَيْتُهُمْ لِي سَاجِدِينَ. They're basically in sujood. Right? So imagine seeing 11 stars in front of you, the sun, the moon, literally bowing down, prostrating towards you. Very strange dream. Right? It's a very strange dream. So the first thing he does, he goes to his father, Yaqub alayhi salam, says, Ya abati, inni ra'aytu. I saw this dream, right? Let me tell you, right? And you can advise me based on this. Father says what? This, right? Verse number 5. Ya bunayya, oh my dear son, la taqsus ru'yaka ala ikhwatik. Don't under any circumstances relate this vision, this dream of yours, to your brothers. How many brothers did Yusuf have? How many? 11 brothers. Okay. Don't relate your vision, this dream, to your 11 brothers. Okay? Why? فَيَكِيدُ لَكَ كَيْدًا. Because they will devise a plot against you. They might start plotting, they might start coming up with something nasty, right? Inna shaytana lil insani aduwwun mubin. Because look, shaytan at the end of the day, he's a sworn enemy, he's a plain open enemy to mankind. Shaytan does this, shaytan loves this, shaytan will jump on this opportunity, right? If there's a seed that's planted in your heart, a seed of doubt, for example, that is enough for shaytan to jump on that and create that into something else. That's a lot of where the animosity, the hatred, all of this stuff comes from. It stems from this. There's something in your heart, and shaitan basically takes that opportunity. So the father realizes, Yaqub alayhi salam, who was a prophet of Allah himself, realizes that, look, you need to be careful right now. Because this dream isn't just an ordinary dream. This dream really means something. He's a prophet, he knows. This dream means something. This dream is dictating that you are going to have an amazing future ahead of you. You are going to become a prophet as well. You are going to have amazing gifts. Right? Allah is going to bless you. Now, if the brothers hear this, the other 11 brothers who are older than you, stronger than you, wiser than you, they're going to feel something in their heart. Right? And sometimes you feel that. Right? You're in a class, mashallah, you've been working hard, revising, right? Literally putting in extra hours. And then that lazy kid gets better grades than you. And you're like, huh? How did that happen? Why? And you're questioning, and there's that seed in your heart now. You're like, surely I deserve that. Why did they get it for? You know what I mean? So that is dangerous, depending on what you do next, of course. I mean, you might feel it, that's not the end of the world, but depending on what you do next, that's going to dictate what's the situation. So Yaqub realizes this. The brothers hear this, they're going to feel something in their hearts. And this is where we talk about diseases of the heart, because when we talk about spirituality, we have to cover diseases of the heart. Now, of course, we're not talking about the physical heart here, we're talking about spiritually. We're not talking about the physical organ, you take it out and literally there's a disease on it. No, we're talking about the spiritual heart here. Within that, we have many spiritual diseases, as they call it. Amradul qulub, spiritual diseases of the heart. Which if they latch onto the heart, if they plague the heart, then spiritually you will suffer. So a lot of times when we're asking the question, why am I not improving spiritually? Why am I not growing spiritually? Why am I not enjoying spiritual matters? Why can I not get closer to Allah? It's probably because we're suffering from what? We're suffering from spiritual disease of the heart. Sometimes it could be multiple at the same time. One of the examples of this is hasad, jealousy. That they say that the reason why Yaqub alayhi salam didn't want Yusuf alayhi salam to go and tell the dream to the brothers is because there's a danger of jealousy. There's a danger of hasad, of envy. And do you know what the Prophet said about envy? Just one example. He says that hasad is so dangerous, right, that it literally ya'kulul hasanat. It eats away at your good deeds. Kama ta'kulun nar al-hatab. Just the way that fire eats away at wood. Fire, the way it burns something, within a few moments it's gone. Literally, ashes, that's all that's left, right? That's the way that hasad can eat away at your hasanat, the good deeds. That's it, nothing left. Just from hasad, just from envy. And you might think, well, it's just a feeling though. It's just a feeling, but it's a very dangerous feeling, right? And in fact, in Surah Yusuf, a lot of these extreme emotions is dealt with in this one surah. So extreme envy or jealousy is dealt with in this surah. Extreme love is also dealt with in this surah. Extreme love is dealt with in this surah. Extreme sadness is also dealt with in this surah. Extreme anger, all of these feelings and emotions that we're talking about, not that you're not allowed to feel it, because you can't be human if you don't feel sadness, if you don't experience anger, if you don't experience jealousy. You won't be human otherwise, right? We have to experience these, but it's how you deal with it. It's how you deal with it, right? That if you don't deal with it in the right way, if you don't remedy it, then things will go pear-shaped, right? Things aren't going to go in the right way. So here we're talking about one example, which is jealousy. And we know exactly what happens in the story. I don't need to tell you. The brothers eventually did find out about the dream. When they found out, we know what they did, right? When they found out, we know what they did. They took this boy, Yusuf alayhi salam, their own blood brother, and they decided to kill him. But they didn't kill him, because they thought that was a bit too extreme. So the next closest thing that they could do, instead of killing him, was so instead of literally having the blood on their hands, is to leave him for dead, basically. So they threw him into the bottom of a well, and in that kind of time and place, that basically means you left that guy for dead. A kid, helpless kid. They left him there, and they, in a remote, area, like a desert area where there's wolves and there's highway robbers and there's dangerous people around. You've left the kid there, that's it basically, that kid's got no chance of surviving. Left the kid there, they go home and they carry on their lives. Obviously, again, I'm cutting up details of the story. What did the father say? They made up a whole story, a lie, and Yaqub knew something's wrong. Right? Now, that is the extremes that these brothers went to against their own blood brother, younger brother, imagine it. Right? Because they had jealousy, because they were like, why not us four? Why didn't Allah choose me instead? This is very dangerous, right? Especially nowadays in the day and age of social media. You guys all know what I'm talking about. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything, right? People are sharing a lot of their highs and successes and broadcasting things, right? Now, yes, on one hand, we need to be careful what we're sharing. Just like Yaqub alayhi salam, he warned his son, be careful who you're telling, because even your brothers, the closest to you, they may not have the right intentions. They may feel something bad against you. If your brothers could do that, then what about anybody else out there? Right? So yes, from that perspective, we've got to be careful. Exactly what are we sharing, who we're sharing it with. Not everybody means well, even your closest friends or your family or whoever, right? You're just going to be careful from that perspective. But I want to talk about the other perspective, which is you as a person. Do you ever feel this? Do you ever feel this envy towards others? If you do, then what can we do about it, right? As Muslims, what should the typical response be? So let's say you've seen someone, mashallah, posting on their LinkedIn that they've got a new job. On Instagram, they've just posted the typical picture, them and their wife with their hands like this, and the ring. We pray to you in pairs as a caption, right? And, mashallah, nikah done. Like, oh, okay, so this guy got married. Wow, how did he get married before me? Right? And then you go on Facebook and someone else just posts a picture of their new car, right? Flashy new car, whatever, right? So you get the gist. People are posting their successes, and within your heart you're feeling, oh, I should have been married by now. I should have got a job. I've been working hard. I should have got this result, right? That's dangerous to feel like that, because you gain nothing from it. Number one, let's talk from a practical point of view. By you feeling bad, what do you gain from it? Nothing. That guy's gonna, mashallah, he's married anyway. He's got the car, he's got the job, she's got this, she's got that. By you feeling that, nothing. You're not going to gain anything. It's not the next day you're going to get married just because you felt something. So you're not going to gain anything. You're only going to lose out. What are you losing out on? The Prophet said, you're losing out on your good deeds. You're losing out on good deeds. So what should we do instead? Right? Because yes, like I said, it's natural to sometimes feel within your heart a desire for that similar thing. So it's fine. Spin it into a positive thing. If you see somebody with something good, then what should you do? Feel happy for them. Make dua for them. Say, mashallah, may Allah bless you, Allahumma barik, right? May Allah increase you. Make dua for them, even if they don't know, even if it's not in front of them. You see it on social media, say, mashallah, that's amazing, great. If you want the same thing, you don't need to feel bad towards that person. What do they do to you? They worked hard for it, Allah bless them, Allah wrote it for them, He decreed it for them, great. What you should do instead, say, mashallah, may Allah bless them. And if you want it, then all you've got to do is A, ask Allah yourself. To say, Allah, I saw, mashallah, so and so. I also want, such and such thing. So hasad is, the definition is that you want a blessing of another person to be taken away from them so you can have it. That's the definition of hasad. You want someone else's blessing to be taken away from them, to be removed from them, just because you want it. Even if you don't want it, just because you feel bad that they have it in the first place. A lot of people, they don't even want it. They just feel bad that you have it, which is really messed up, right? So instead of that, let's say you don't want the blessing to be removed from them. You just want also a share in that same kind of blessing. Ask Allah for it. Say, Allah, bless. If it's good for me, Allah bless me with the same thing, with something similar. In fact, with something better even, right? Make dua for them and ask Allah on your end, and then work hard for it. If it's a car, for example, you can't just expect Allah to for someone to just deliver a car to you the next day. It doesn't work that way. You've got to work hard for it, right? So this is one example. Jealousy or envy is one example of a spiritual disease of the heart. You can see what can happen if you don't remedy it in time. Then you're going to feel jealous towards people. You're going to feel envious all the time, and it plagues your heart. So you can never get along with people, and you can't stand seeing anyone else successful. And this is nowadays in the Western business world that we're talking about, the corporate world. This is the kind of mindset that they encourage you to have. That you should be competitive, and by competitive meaning you want to take everyone else down so that you can get to the top. And as Muslims, we don't believe in this. We don't believe in taking everyone else down so you can get to the top. We believe in, yes, getting to the top and taking others with you, no problem. Right? There's a saying, like you can build the biggest building in town without having to tear anyone else's building down. Make sense? Yeah? You can build the biggest building. That doesn't mean anyone else can't have a big building as well. You need to go and demolish everybody else's buildings first and then build your own. Right? Everyone can have a share in the good, inshallah. Allah is, as we know, Allah says He is Al-Razaq, He is Al-Wahhab. He is the one that, He is the ultimate provider, He is the ultimate sustainer, He is the ultimate giver and gifter. Allah's risk doesn't, Allah's capacity doesn't decrease just because He's giving other people and He's giving you as well. Does that make sense? So, envy is one example, and like I said, there's other examples within the surah, within the Quran, beyond that, of spiritual diseases of the heart. Like I said, anger could be a spiritual disease of the heart. Insincerity could be a spiritual disease of the heart. Right? You want to show off your insincerity. This is a disease of the heart. Right? May Allah protect us. You have other diseases of the heart. For example, like we said, extreme love or attachment to something or someone is also a disease of the heart. Right? So all of these areas, what we need to do is, and you might ask, how do I know that I have it? There are telltale signs for each one. Right? There are symptoms, like for any illness, a physical illness, you have a symptom, right? Yeah, so you have a dry cough, okay, or you have this, or you have that. It's a symptom for an illness. Likewise, with spiritual diseases, there's symptoms that you need to know by studying them and identifying them. And the only other way you can know is if you yourself reflect. Self-reflection. If you yourself think about it, reflect, and think, am I going in the right direction? Or is this wrong? Is this a bad thing? Right? So this is the first lesson. Diseases of the heart. What are we taking away? That we should be careful from both perspectives. We focus on envy, and Surah Yusuf deals a lot with envy. And of course, at the end of the day, this whole sad story, because it is a very sad story at the end of the day, it always happened really because the brothers could not control themselves, and they had envy towards Yusuf alayhi salam. Okay, let's move on to another lesson. And by the way, I had to summarize these lessons a lot, because Surah Yusuf has so many lessons. Like in my book, for example, I only put down 40 lessons. I know a sheikh who has done a PhD on Surah Yusuf, and he found 1,000 lessons in the surah. So imagine finding 1,000 lessons in one surah. In 111 verses, on average, that's 10 lessons from each verse on average that he found. 1,000 lessons is not a joke, right? So you can imagine the Quran is like an ocean, and there's so many lessons to find. And this is really, what we're supposed to be doing with the Quran. We're supposed to be finding these lessons. So the next lesson I could refer you to is a really important one. It's more to do with spiritual development and personal development. Right? We speak about personal development a lot nowadays. So it is about refining your character. Refining your character. We learn this from Yusuf alayhi salam. So let me tell you something interesting about Yusuf alayhi salam, right? He was someone that we know from famous narration, hadith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Yusuf alayhi salam with half of this world's beauty was given to one man, Yusuf alayhi salam. Half of this world's beauty was given to Yusuf alayhi salam. So you can imagine what an amazingly handsome man he was. He was so handsome that Allah tells us in the Quran, right? That number one, firstly, we know the whole famous incident between him and the minister's wife. The minister's wife. So again, cutting the long story short, he ends up in a well. He's thrown into the well by his brothers. But eventually a group of travelers come. They are trying to fetch water, but then in the process they find Yusuf at the bottom of the well. They take him, they sell him as a slave in Egypt. So he's not from Egypt, he's from another area, another village. They take him to Egypt, because that's the main place there, and they sell him as a slave. Imagine what he's going through, a kid. And that servant ends up in the palace of the minister of Egypt. So you can see Allah's taken him from the well to the palace of the minister of Egypt. Make sense? Alright, I'm cutting out the details, but he is now, as we speak, in the palace of the minister of Egypt. The minister, we're talking about one of the most powerful men in the entire land right now. The minister's wife, a very powerful woman herself, falls in love with Yusuf alayhi salam. So this is what we're talking about. Another disease of the heart, which is extreme, passionate love. Now, love itself isn't a bad thing. But to feel this type of love, or we call it, it's not really love, we call it infatuation or lust. This is also a disease of the heart. You start getting attached to things so easily. This is what happened to Yusuf alayhi salam, because he was such a handsome man that the minister's wife basically felt attraction towards him and tried to seduce him. And not only that, but then the minister's wives, her friends, so meaning like think about all the influential women in Egypt, right? They were gathered and they saw Yusuf alayhi salam. And Allah tells us that at the time they were cutting fruits, right? They were cutting fruits at the time. And Yusuf alayhi salam walks in and he was so handsome, he was so stunning, right? That as they're cutting the fruit, they're looking up at him and they're like, whoa, and they start cutting their fingers. Allah says, وَقَطَّعْنَ أَيْدِيَهُنَّ. They started cutting their fingers. وَقُلْنَا حَاشَ لِلَّهِ. They said, no way, no way. مَا هَذَا بَشَرًا. This cannot be a man. إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا مَلَكٌ كَرِيمٌ. This has to be a noble angel. They didn't believe that Yusuf was a man. They thought he was an angel. That's how amazingly handsome he was. And they cut their hands. They had no idea. They cut their fingers. And they're still raving about Yusuf. This is so extreme, right? Imagine this. Now, Yusuf alayhi salam, he was someone who obviously, he was very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He wanted to get out of this situation. He didn't want to stay in this palace anymore. So he decided that, he said, Rabbi as-sijnu ahabbu ilayya. He said, my Lord, he called out to Allah, he made dua. As-sijn, the prison, ahabbu ilayya is more beloved to me, mimma yad'unani ilayh, than that which they are calling me towards. This evil that they're trying to entice me towards, I would rather go to prison and stay away from all of this. And that's what Allah did. Allah gets him to go to the prison. Obviously, you can't just, the prison isn't a hotel. You can't book a room in a prison, right? And be like, can I stay there for 5 nights? It doesn't work like that. So how does he end up in the prison? Allah's got a plan for Yusuf. This is what you have to imagine. We said he's in Egypt right now. That wasn't a coincidence. Allah has already told us in the surah, وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. In this manner, we devised the plan that Yusuf would be in Egypt. Allah intended Yusuf to get to Egypt. Where you are in your life right now, it's not a coincidence. The fact that you're here at Nottingham University is not a coincidence. Allah already planned that would for you. Even if you had a complete separate plan, I was supposed to be at another university, I was supposed to be studying another course, I was supposed to be here and there, whatever, right? Allah's already got a plan in place for you, you just don't know it. Because we don't know the unseen. Allah is alimul ghayb, He knows the unseen, right? So we're very limited in our knowledge. Allah has already planned for Yusuf to be in Egypt. That is the destined land for Yusuf. And do you know something? By Allah intending this for Yusuf, you would think, any of us, limited human beings with limited knowledge, do you know what we would think? We always say this, right? Why is Allah doing this to Yusuf for? He's a prophet of Allah. Why is Allah torturing Yusuf for? Why is Allah picking on Yusuf for? This is what we say, right? Because you look around the world, you see all the problems, and people, this is the first thing they question God on. Oh, how could God do this if this is happening in the world, this war, okay, this child, this orphan, this massacre, how could God allow this to happen, right? We're very limited, so this is how we think. And don't you think, people were saying the same thing about Yusuf, poor kid, why is Allah doing this to him for? What did he do to deserve it? He's a good kid, etc., etc. You know what? By Allah doing this to Yusuf, do you know the course of history changed entirely in that entire region? How? You might be wondering, okay, how? Let me tell you, if I fast forward hundreds of years, when Yusuf wasn't around anymore. By Allah making Yusuf go to Egypt, right? Making Yusuf go to Egypt. Eventually, by him going to Egypt, if he never went to Egypt, he never would have become the minister of Egypt. So spoiler alert, at the end of the story, Yusuf becomes the minister of Egypt himself. Right? Allah, he grows up to become the minister of Egypt. Had he not become the minister of Egypt, his family never would have moved with him. His family, those 11 brothers of his, and his father, Yaqub, they never would have moved to Egypt as well, had he never been there in the first place. And guess what happened? History changed entirely. Because the family of Yusuf, in total, how many sons? Including Yusuf, how many? 12. These 12 sons. They were the children of who? Who's the father? Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub alayhi salam is also known as Israel. Right? His title is Israel. So these children were known as Bani Israel. The children of Yaqub alayhi salam were known as Bani Israel. The children of Israel. Yaqub alayhi salam. And these 12 sons went on to form the 12 tribes, the 12 famous tribes of the Israelites, Bani Israel. So all the prophets that followed in that land, in that region, Musa alayhi salam, for example, he is from the lineage, right? Isa alayhi salam, Maryam alayhi salam. All of these amazing people, Zakaria alayhi salam, all of these prophets, they come from Yusuf alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam. If Allah didn't make him go to Egypt, then none of this would have happened. Allah had a plan, not just for Yusuf, but for the generations to follow. But we are so limited in our knowledge, we don't know this, right? So anyway, my point is that he ends up in Egypt. He ends up eventually becoming the minister. But before we get to that story, we said he's in prison, right? This is where it ties in with this. Now when you go to prison, who are you surrounded by? Good people or bad people? Right, you're surrounded by murderers, serial killers, rapists, thieves, the lowest of the low in society, right? These are people who have committed crimes, and a lot of times, many of them you might even find, they're not even remorseful of it. They don't even regret what they've done, right? Yusuf is in prison, and he's surrounded by such people. But subhanAllah, when you look at the character of Yusuf, right, and compare it to, for example, if we were surrounded by such people, right, we would have just looked down on people, judged them, spoken badly to them, right? Yusuf never did this. In fact, he was so good in the prison that the people realized this man is special. The inmates of the prison, they realized this is a special man. They went to him, and do you know what they said to him? They said, "Inna naraka min al-muhsinin." Oh Yusuf, "Inna naraka min al-muhsinin." We can see that you are a man from the muhsinin. Muhsinin means an excellent person, person of ihsan, person of good character, great character and conduct, the best, perfect character, right? The inmates of the prison realize that this is a different man. He's not like the others. He has such amazing character and conduct in the way that even the way he's dealing with us. He could have looked down on us, he could have said anything to us, but he's good even with us. So what's amazing is that Yusuf, even in prison, his character was at this level, right? And I want to just again fast forward the story very quickly, cutting out some details. If you fast forward the story, remember I said, eventually Yusuf he comes out of the prison and he becomes the minister of the land. He becomes the minister of Egypt, one of the most powerful men of Egypt. And guess what? Even then, right, and now you could argue when you're in a position of such great power, you're now an MP, or you're now in the Houses of Parliament, you are a Prime Minister, or, you're at that level, right? You could do whatever you want. Now you could look down on people, now you can get snobby and arrogant and things, right? Again, the same thing, the people loved Yusuf so much then, they said the same thing. Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. We see that you are a person of excellent character. You are a person of excellent. What do we learn from this? Consistency, number one, in character is really important. Yusuf in prison versus Yusuf at home versus Yusuf as a minister versus Yusuf when he was at his lowest point in life versus when he was at his highest point in life, his character didn't change. And a lot of us, this is a really important test of our character, right? It's really easy sometimes to be good to people that you don't know. Okay, let me rephrase that because sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes people you don't know, you're not nice to them. But like you're outside in a friend circle and stuff, you show a certain side of you. You go home, you're a completely different person with the way you treat your parents, or your siblings, or your family. And then, you go out to a restaurant and you have a waiter or waitress that's serving you, and you're speaking however you want to them because it's just a waiter or waitress. You see a cleaner, it's just a cleaner. And you treat them however you treat them like rubbish basically. But then, subhanAllah, you see the CEO of a company walking past, or you see an influencer or celebrity, or you see, an MP, you're like, oh yeah, you're showing your best character again, you're being really nice, overly nice, right? This is inconsistency in character. So spiritually and personally, this is not a good sign, right? We need to be consistent. It doesn't matter if it's the waiter or waitress. I always use this example because we do it all the time. We're always going out, right? We always go out to eat, get desserts. I don't know what joints there are in Nottingham, right? I haven't really explored. I'm sure there's if you have a chai wala in Nottingham? Yeah. Oh, mashallah, you got chai wala everywhere now, right? Anyway, let's say you're in chai wala, wherever, right? You're there, okay? Now, you're always going out for meals, for desserts, whatever, yeah? And the person serving you, you have no manners towards them because you think, I don't know this person. This person's just serving me. This person's just a waiter or waitress. What do I care about them? But subhanAllah, they are a human, they have feelings, they're doing a job, even if things are running late or things aren't going to plan. Yeah, you're still going to be good to them, you're going to be nice to them. So what if it's a bit late? Yeah, you're allowed to complain if it's really bad, but don't be bad to them. A lot of times it's not their fault. I get it at weddings all the time, right? I've been to hundreds of weddings because of my work with nikahs and things. And sometimes I'm sitting at a table, and subhanAllah, all the people are doing the whole time. The bride and groom have spent like 20k on their wedding, just so people can come and eat. And the people on the table, what are they doing? They're sitting there saying, the the curry's cold, it's too spicy, it's too bland, the waiters are rubbish, the service is rubbish, there's no AC in this room. They don't complain how much, subhanAllah, just calm down, man. It's a wedding. This is not a 5-star hotel service that you've come to, a buffet or something. This is a wedding. Be happy. They've spent a lot of money to cater for you. Who cares if it's a bit cold or whatever? Just enjoy it. It's fine. This is what we become serial complainers. We just complain all the time. You go on social media, everybody's complaining about everything. Nothing's fine, right? Okay, now like I said, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to complain, right? But there's certain things, character-wise, you should be good towards each other, right? This is what we call refining character. What we learn from Yusuf from this lesson is that, look, when it comes to character, be consistent, number one. And number two, no matter what situation you're in life, have a good level of character. And build your character. Character building, it takes time. Right? How do you build your character? There's many different ways. Right? One is being in good company, for example. If you're in company of people who are treating other people like rubbish, you're going to just follow them, because every time you're in their company, you're going to think, yeah, I can get away with it. Right? So being in good company, it helps a lot. Right? Looking at the Sunnah, what our Prophet was like. Yeah, I'll give you an example. One Sahabi, famous Sahabi, Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu. You heard of Anas bin Malik? Famous Sahabi, because he's one of the top narrators of hadith. You will always, many hadiths you read, وعن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه. Right, on the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, he narrates on the Prophet and he said the following. Right? Why was he a top narrator of hadith? A top narrator of hadith, it must be someone, right? It's not a coincidence. They must have spent a lot of time with the Prophet compared to others. Another top narrator of hadith, give me a name. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Right? He was only a Muslim for 2 years during the life of the Prophet. But those 2 years were the last 2 years of the Prophet's life. And he spent day in, day out with the Prophet. That's why he became a top narrator. Who's the other top narrator? His own family member. Aisha, no coincidence, the wife of the Prophet that's there with him day in, day out. If you want to become a top narrator of hadith, you've got to be with the Prophet. Anas bin Malik, how was he with the Prophet day in, day out? Because from the age of 10 years old to the age of 20 years old, 10 years. The Prophet was in Medina for 10 years. He migrated from Mecca, right? And he passed away 10 years later. So he spent 10 years in Medina, right? For those 10 years, Anas bin Malik was the personal servant of the Prophet. He was the servant of the Prophet. Not slave, servant, meaning that he would help the Prophet out. Because that's what he wanted to do, that of his own will. So basic things, not like major things, but basic things, the Prophet, he wakes up for the tahajjud and he needs water for wudu. Anas prepares the water for him. He needs to wipe himself. Or things like that. Anas helps him. He's willingly helping the Prophet. And he himself narrates, Anas bin Malik, he narrates, that 10 years I served the Prophet. He's a kid, 10-year-old, 11-year-old. How do we speak to kids even? Think about it, right? 10 years I was with the Prophet. He says, I never heard once him rebuke me or say anything bad to me. Even though as a kid, this first is the message of Allah, and this is someone who's much older, easily they could say something bad. Oh, why are you late for? Why is the water too cold for? Anything you can say. So I never heard that once from the lips of the Prophet. He always was someone who encouraged me. So what do we learn? Again, look at the prophetic model. If you want to learn character building and refining, look at the Sunnah. Study Hadith, study the Seerah, and you will find this is how we should be with people. Right? So Yusuf we learn, honestly, I could speak all day just about the character of Yusuf and all of the things that he did leading up to the rest, right? We're going to move on, inshallah. In fact, before we move on, everyone stand up, please. Quickly stand up. Quickly stand up if you can. Everyone stand up, please. Right? Stand up, just breathe, and because I've been speaking for more than half an hour, so I know how it gets. Right? Especially someone like me, listening to someone like me, boring. Right? Yeah. So stand, inshallah. You can talk to the person next to you, you can smile, you can do whatever. Right? Just don't walk off, basically. That's what I ask you to do. Okay? So you can sit down. No problem. Sit down. Right? If you want to stay standing, you can stay standing. No problem. I don't mind. But it's been more than half an hour, so I just want you to have a breather because I don't want to talk for too long. I'm going to finish. I've only got 5 lessons that I've summarized for today. So we've got 3 more. We've done 2, 3 more. Okay, the next 2, and then final one at the end, which I'm going to end off with. Okay? The next lesson in spiritual development. So the first 2, what have we done so far? Number 1 was Disease of the heart, so envy, jealousy, things like this, right? Disease of the heart, remedying these things. Number 2 was refining character, character development, personal development, okay, from Yusuf alayhi salam. Now, number 3 is a really difficult one. The power of letting go. The power of letting go. Now, this is way towards the end of the story, so I'm cutting out all of the details, right? But what eventually happens, Yusuf alayhi salam, right, he is reunited with his family. You know the same brothers that threw him into the well many, many years before that, right? The same brothers, he comes face to face with them. But, without going into detail, I mean, they did not recognize him, but he recognized them. Allah promised this already to him, right? Allah already promised that this is going to happen. A day will come, O Yusuf, he was told this in the well. A day will come, right? لَتُنَبِّئَنَّهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِمْ هَذَا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. You are going to tell them of everything that has happened, and they will not even be aware. They will not have any knowledge of who you are. He was promised this in the well, and Allah never breaks his promise. So now this promise is coming true. That he sees, can you imagine 10 older brothers he's got? They're walking in one by one. He's looking at them, he's like, I recognize these guys. Not many people have 10 brothers, number 1, firstly, right? And number 2, I mean, come on, look, when you're an adult, your facial features and things, they don't change as much, right? So he recognizes them, he knows that's his brothers. Why did they recognize him? Because how old did we say he was roughly when they threw him into the well? 6, 7 years, you know, Allah knows best, but he's a kid, right? Kids, I mean, come on, you see them 40 years later, 30 years later, they're not going to look the same. So they had, and in their mind, psychologically, they thought he's dead anyway. They left him in the well, they thought this guy's not going to survive. So they had zero inclination, zero idea that Yusuf alayhi salam would even be alive, number 1, and number 2, that he would be the minister of Egypt. Remember, we said he's now the minister of Egypt. How is a kid that we threw into the well work his way up to become the CEO? It doesn't work out. But subhanAllah, I always say this, right? Every CEO or these business personalities, these great multi-billionaires, your Bill Gates, these guys that we look up to nowadays. If you hear their stories, what's amazing is every single one of them, almost, they have this amazing story of struggle, don't they? Even whatever, whoever you look up to, these people, these celebrities or whatever, they have these stories. Their stories are never like, yeah, mashallah, I was born a millionaire, and then what happened was, like, I just started a business, and I woke up the next morning, and there was £1 million in my bank account. Right? It was never like that. It was always a struggle, failed business after the other, right? Something to do with family, estranged, and they were kicked out of their homes, and they were homeless. Like, you hear these crazy stories. So I always say, like, Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't have this overnight success. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just give him everything in one go. He went through the struggles. He went from being thrown into the well, betrayed by his family, becomes a servant, ends up in the palace, ends up in prison. He goes through all of this. That was building his character. It's one of the reasons why we get tested, right? It's to build us, to learn lessons from it. Okay? So now Yusuf alayhi salam, he is the minister of Egypt. And his brothers are in front of him. And, I'm cutting lots of details out, but again, towards the end of the story, the brothers, when they finally recognized Yusuf alayhi salam, when he finally disclosed his identity, the brothers realized they made a mistake. And they said to Yusuf alayhi salam, they literally came to Yusuf alayhi salam, and remember, he's the minister. He is the most powerful man right now. He can do whatever. He can take revenge right now. He can enact his revenge. He can throw them in prison, torture them, do whatever. He can be like, how dare you? I have not forgotten what you did to me. But they come to the brother and they said, Yusuf, we messed up big time. Yeah? So Yusuf, we messed up big time. Please, can you forgive us? Right? And Yusuf alayhi salam, what did he say? He said, no way. No way, Jose. Right? I ain't gonna forgive you. Right? Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. An amazing response from an amazing man. Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, you know what, I'm just going to let go today. There's no blame on you today. Allah will forgive you because Allah is the most merciful of all. Can you imagine saying that to brothers of yours that threw you into the well, that wanted to kill you, but letting go entirely, right? That is amazing. I always say it's one of the most powerful lessons from Surah Yusuf, which is also simultaneously one of the most difficult things that we find to do today. It is one of the most difficult things to let go. It is so difficult, right? Forgiving is so difficult to do Because it takes what? It takes us. What does it take for a man or woman to do? It means that they have to literally overcome their egos. They have to overcome their egos and the pride and be like, you know what, I'm going to be the bigger and better person and I'm going to just forgive them. Do you know how strong you have to be? How strong you have to be to do that? ليس الشديد كالسرعة ليس الشديد السرعة, right? The strongest person, or كما قال, is not the person that can wrestle others and physically is strong. إنما الشديد الذي يملك نفسه عند الغضب. The strong person is the one that can restrain themselves at the moment of anger. Yusuf Islam, he was very angry with his brothers, and we can't deny that. He felt anger. It's natural to feel anger. It's completely natural to feel anger, right? But what do you do at that point? Do you lash out? Do you go into the kitchen and throw the dishes everywhere and swear at this person? Or do you control the anger, right? Because it's not haram to feel angry. You're allowed to feel angry. What do you do next is what we're judged on, right? You can feel anger, it's not a problem. So what we learned from Yusuf Islam is he let go. And he said, fine, no problem, right? You're free. You're free to go. I forgive, because I'm seeing the bigger picture here. The bigger picture here is that I want my family to come back together. I've been separated from my father, from you guys for too long, and if you are sincere, then I forgive you. And they were sincere. And this teaches you another lesson, that people who once upon a time literally wanted to kill their own brother, even they can change. Even they can change. And they did change. They become good, righteous people afterwards. There's not a problem with that. You can become better. You can better yourself. No matter what you did in the past, you can overcome that. And it's another lesson that we learn. And by the way, at the same time, what happened to Yaqub alayhi salam, the father, imagine how hurt he was by what his sons had done. They did the same thing. They went to their father. They said, Ya abana, istaghfir lana dhunubana, inna kunna khati'in. They said, our father, please forgive us. Seek forgiveness on our behalf. We messed up. We made a huge mistake. And he says, Sawfa astaghfiru lakum Rabbi. He says, don't worry, I will seek forgiveness on your behalf from my Lord. Don't worry about it. Even Yaqub, he lets go and he forgives. Right? This is what you call a true level of patience, of forgiveness, of what we find difficult to do, letting go. Right? Nowadays, subhanAllah, you will hear that a person literally is holding on to a grudge for 10 years because 10 years ago you didn't invite me to your son's wedding. And that's it, I'm not inviting you to my son's wedding now. And forget my son, my grandson as well. And they will hold on to a grudge for 10 years because of that. You hear stories like this. It's a bit ajib, right? It's like, whoa, subhanAllah, just because of that, right? Just because somebody tweeted something at you, they sent you a tweet and they said something to you, you're like, that's it, right? I'm gonna, curse this person and talk about it for my whole life. Just let go. It's fine. There's certain things you can ignore. Social media beef, trust me, you can ignore that, right? You can trust me. It's not gonna change your life. You can literally just ignore that and move on. It's not a problem. There's certain things you can ignore. Small comments. Somebody's having a bad day. You have personal blood. You have good thoughts about that person. It's okay. I'll let it go. Somebody said something. It's fine. I'm not going to hold on to that. Just for that one reason. Yeah, major things, no doubt. But even with major things, you can forgive. By the way, you should still forgive. If that person is sincere and they ask you for forgiveness, you should forgive. Now, do you have to forget? Do you forget? Why not?
There's a lesson in it.
There's a lesson in it, good, yeah. Why else would you forget? Or should you not forget? When we say forget, obviously we can't take that literally, right? Because it's very difficult to forget something. You can't erase something from your memory. So of course you can never forget in that sense, right? When we say forgive and forget, right, it doesn't mean that you forget, literally erase it from the memory, etched out, deleted in the recycle bin. You can't do that, right? But it means that you don't bring it up again also, because that's not a nice thing to do. It's what some people do. They forgive you, right? Because once upon a time you borrowed some money off them and you paid it back late, and they were angry with you. So they forgave you, but then they keep reminding you every time you go out. Remember that time? Yeah, you're an unreliable person. You're never going to pay me back, were you? They keep reminding you. That's not nice. You shouldn't do that, right? But move on. Allah says in the Quran, "Fa'fu wasfahu." Right? Allah says, pardon others, wasfahu, and let go. Let go means you don't let that dictate your life anymore. Some scholars, they say it comes from a safha. Safha means a page. Literally it's a page. You turn the page, basically. Turn the page, that's a new chapter. That was the previous chapter. I'm not going to forget it. It's there. It happened in life. I learned the lesson from it. Maybe I won't trust you again with my money or whatever. I learned a lesson from it, but I'm not going to keep holding on to that now. I'm not going to keep reminding you of what you did. Khalas, that's it. Do you think Yusuf reminded his brothers years down the line? You guys are the ones that threw me in the well. Right? You guys screwed me over. You guys betrayed. Do you think he reminded me? He never did that. Right? In fact, what we learn at the end of the surah, subhanAllah, this is the character of Yusuf, yeah? When he's reflecting on his life, he says that, my Lord, oh Allah, you saved me. Right? You saved me and you reunited my family. من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي. He says, after shaitan caused between my brothers a level of discord. Right? So who did he attribute it to? The brothers or who? Shaitan. Do you see how clever he is with his wording? And how Yusuf his thinking is. He could have said, oh Allah, you reunited me with my family after my brother screwed me over. But he said, no, after shaitan, من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي. After shaitan caused issues between me and my brothers. Actually, shaitan came and did it. It's not really their fault. I understand. I can understand what happened at that point. Empathy, understanding, So this is a really important one. Letting go, finding it within ourselves to forgive others and to turn the page, right? Final few lessons, inshallah, which is whenever we talk about spirituality, we have to talk about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And in the story of Yusuf, what we find is someone who at every juncture of his life is remembering Allah. At every juncture of his life. For example, I'll give you an example. When it comes to the very end of the story, he's welcoming his family to Egypt. So remember, his family, he's reunited with his father, Yaqub, he's reunited with his brothers, he's forgiven them. All is forgotten in that sense, right? And he says what? He says, Udkhulu Misra Insha'Allahu Aminin. Right? He says that, oh my family, welcome. Enter Egypt. Enter this land. Aminin. Right? Safely, securely. But he adds something. He says, Insha'Allah. He says what? Insha'Allah. God willing, if Allah wills. Right? If Allah wills. Now, some scholars, they say, why did Yusuf say Insha'Allah at this point for? Some people might ask the question, right? They're literally here now. Right? It's like imagine you have to go pick up your friend from the train station. Right? Now you would understand if before the train set off they said, I'll see you at 7:30 p.m. inshallah. But imagine they've arrived now and literally you're at the gates waiting for them and you can see them approaching you. You're like, come inshallah, you're gonna arrive. They're like, I'm already here, but you don't need to say inshallah. Literally imagine Yusuf saying to you, no, because subhanAllah, you attribute everything to Allah. Inshallah is so misunderstood. Right? We call it the inshallah syndrome, right? Literally, Muslims they misunderstand inshallah, right? It's like inshallah now has become either something which is like it's become like a joke. You mess around with it. It's like are you coming to the event tomorrow, bro? Yeah, inshallah. Yeah. But in your mind, you're like, no, I'm not going. But you're messing around with Allah's name. You're like, yeah, inshallah. It's just a nice thing to say. If you can't make it, just say, I'm really sorry, bro. I can't make it, and give you a reason. You don't need to be like, inshallah, just for the sake of it. It's Allah's name. If Allah wills, it's become like a joke. Now, if Allah wills, it means with certainty. Even if something's definitely going to happen, anything can still happen. Right? You've made all the plans, and you're like, I don't need to say inshallah, I'm going anyway. Allah can still make something happen. Right? There's a famous story I say as a kid, right? Of that man. There's a man who went to the shops just to buy a new pair of shoes. Right? And he's told his family, I'm going out to the shops, I'm going to buy a new pair of shoes, sandals basically, slippers. And the family said, say inshallah. Before you go, just say inshallah. He said, why should I say inshallah for? The shop is literally at the end of the road. I'm going to walk out from my house. Within 2 minutes, I'm going to go and buy it and khalas and come back home. Why should I say inshallah? He said, don't be silly, guys. You guys are too Muslimic for me. I tell you all these terms, right? It's okay, fine. So he's on his way, and obviously back then they didn't have the wallets and stuff we have here. He's got like a pouch, right? He's walking to the shop and he's unaware. A thief comes, cuts the pouch, walks away with it. He gets to the shop, mashallah, on the counter, and he's like, I want to buy these pair of shoes. Like, okay, bismillah, this is the price. And he's like, oh, damn it, I don't have them. I don't know where my money's gone, right? And they're like, well, sorry, Afi, get out of here then if you're not going to pay me. And he goes home, the family are like, oh, where's your new shoes? It's not here. He said, you should have said inshallah though, right? Yeah, you didn't say inshallah, that's what happened, right? You think something's guaranteed in life. No, it's not guaranteed. right? So even though they're here, Yusuf says, Inshallah, aminin. Inshallah, you come in a safe manner because you just never know what can happen. And there's numerous other examples in the story where, Yusuf mentions Allah's name. Remember we said the minister's wife tried to entice Yusuf. The first thing he said was, Ma'ad Allah. He said, I seek refuge in Allah. He mentions Allah's name. Yaqub, his father, every time he mentions Allah's name. So mentioning Allah's name, what it does is you need to get into the habit and routine of mentioning Allah's name. It's not reserved for the masjid. It's not reserved for an Islamic event. It's not reserved just for when you open the Quran. It's not reserved for when you just begin your salah. Dhikr, or remembering Allah's name, is a daily routine embedded throughout your life. You leave the home, you say Bismillah. You enter the home, you say Bismillah. You know what happens, by the way, when you do that? There's rewards. Not just rewards, there's extra added benefits and bonuses as well. You know that there's a famous hadith, Prophet said, you leave the home, and you say, Bismillah tawakkaltu ala Allah, right? Even if you don't know the whole Quran, just say Bismillah. Angels will come and protect you. Hudita wa kufita. You've been guided and you've been sufficeful. They will literally come and guard you. Alright? You come back home and you open the door, and instead of saying, honey, I'm home, or whatever people say nowadays, right? You say Bismillah, before you close the door, Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum, or something, right? Mention Allah's name coming home. Prophet said, for a person who enters the home and mentions Allah's name, Shaitan literally turns around to his companions and says, there's no home to stay in tonight. Literally, he says, because this person mentioned Allah's name as they entered, he says, you have no place to stay. And similarly, same hadith, if a person says Bismillah before eating, Shaitan says to his companions, you have no food today. No food to eat today. But on the other hand, if you don't say Bismillah or mention Allah's name before eating or before entering the home, Shaitan says to his companions, yo, we've got a place to stay in tonight. Let's go crash here. Right? Shaitan says, we've got some food to eat, we've got some grub. Right, chaiwa, Bismillah, let's go for it. Right? We're going to do it. Because you didn't mention Allah's name. Protection, right? Reward. All of these bonuses by mentioning Allah's name. Make it part of your routine. You're walking to the bus stop, right? Before you go to sleep, when you wake up, mention Allah's name. You're driving or whatever. Make some dhikr. Make some remembrance of Allah. Don't just leave it for when you're praying salah. Right? Trust me, there's extra bonuses that you will get from this as well. Final lesson, inshallah, before we end. Apologies if I'm going over time. But I just want to end with the correct mindset to have for us as Muslims. When we talk about personal development, spiritual development, on all areas, one of the lessons that we take from Yusuf is really the mindset that he had. Right? And the main mindset that Yusuf had was he wanted to excel, not just, well, I say not just, but he wanted to excel in this world and in the next life, most importantly, of course. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. The akhirah is far better and superior. Is far better for the believers, for those who have faith, and for those who have taqwa. Right? Allah tells us in Surah Yusuf. Yusuf was someone who, again, you could argue, yes, he went through a lot of struggles. But what did we say? He's a man who came from a noble family. He had a noble lineage. He is a man that was given half the world's beauty. He is a man who became a minister of Egypt. He is a man who was popular, who became known by the people, who was loved by the people. He was a man who could interpret, dreams and so on. He had many gifts and talents, right? In terms of the dunya, Yusuf, he had everything as well. He ticked the boxes, really, when you think about it. And likewise, of course, in terms of the akhirah, he ticked all the boxes, no doubt. Right? He reached the highest stations because he was a prophet of Allah, the good that he did in his community for the people of Egypt. You think about his character that we spoke about as part of one of the lessons as well. You think about Yusuf, he all-rounder, what an amazing man and an amazing prophet he was. And this is a mindset that we as Muslims need to have. That, remember we said that verse, Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. We see you as a person of ihsan. We need to be people of ihsan. Everything that we do, we need to aim for the best. Not average. Prophet said, you make dua, right? You make dua, fas'aluhu al-firdaus. You ask Allah for something, ask Him for al-firdaus. Ask Him, where's firdaus? Middle level of Jannah? The highest level of Jannah. Don't say, Ya Allah. When you make dua, don't say, Ya Allah, I am a sinner. I don't deserve Jannah. So, if you want, to Allah, then just put me somewhere in Jannah. Low class, somewhere. This is not how we should make dua. It's average. It's an average mindset. No, you should say, Ya Allah, you are the most merciful. You are, in your hands is all good. Oh Allah, you can forgive me, oh Allah, forgive me. Oh Allah, grant me the highest levels of Jannah. Oh Allah, give me the companionship of the best companionship. Yusuf, he made this dua at the end of his life. we had the verses being recited at the beginning. Yusuf, he makes a famous dua, right? And he says, فَاطِرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَنْتَ وَلِيِّي فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. Just tawaffa, oh Allah, tawaffani muslima. The only concern he has now towards the end of his life is, oh Allah, allow me to die in the state of Islam, in the state of submission. وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ. And oh Allah, join me with the righteous company in the hereafter. How many of us think about this? In the next life, who am I going to be with? Prophet said, Al-Mar'u ma'a man ahab. Right? A person is going to be with whomsoever they love. He or she loves. You will be with them in the next life. If you love so-and-so, you're going to be with them. So some of the scholars, they say, Yusuf alayhi salam, he wanted to be in the company of the righteous, like his father Yaqub alayhi salam, like his grandfather Ishaq alayhi salam, like his great-grandfather Ibrahim alayhi salam. He wanted to be in their company in the next life. So this is a mindset we should have. We should aim for the very best in this life and aim for the very best in the next life. Right? And this is encompassed by the famous dua, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Right? Because in the previous verse, you know what Allah says? There are people, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً. There are those people who say, our Lord, give us success in this life. And they stop there. So what does Allah say? وَمَا لَهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. For these people in the hereafter, they're not going to have a portion of the hereafter. There's no share of the hereafter for them. Because you ask for dunya, you're going to get dunya, no problem. You ask for dunya, you're going to get dunya. You're not going to get anything else. But then Allah says in the next verse, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ. There are those who say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. There are those who say, oh Allah, success in this life and additionally success in the next life. So then Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا. Well, they're going to get the portion that they deserve and have acquired. That is their portion for them. So you have to ask Allah for it. You've got to work hard for it as well. As students, right? As young adults, as young Muslims in the community, you've got to aim, not average, okay, I somehow pass my exams, get through my studies, inshallah, get a job later on in life. Okay, I'll settle down, get married, right? That's it, No, aim for more than that. Yes, do those things. Aim for the best in your career, in your studies and things like that. And then think about what can I do also, additionally. What more can I do in this? What legacy can I leave behind as well? Right? And then in terms of your akhirah, you're constantly working towards it and building something there as well. So, in summary, these are just a few lessons that we can take from Surah Yusuf in terms of spiritual development, right? So, we spoke about refining your character, right? We spoke about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? These are just some lessons. Remember, I remind you of the last verse, or the very end of Surah Yusuf, which is that in these stories and narrations, there are lessons for the people of intellect. So what we're supposed to do, anytime you come across a story in the Quran or the Seerah or wherever, you want to ask yourself, instead of thinking, okay, this is a good story, this is an interesting story, you want to ask yourself, what lessons can I take from it? Am I walking away from this a better person? Am I walking away from this with more knowledge? Or am I just walking away with, it's just neutral, there's not much I'm gaining from this, right? So we're supposed to ask lessons. What lessons can I take from this, right? Ramadan coming up, we'll talk about connecting with the Quran a lot. We talk about reciting Quran, etc., right? Connecting with the Quran also means that, what can I learn from it? What can I implement? What can I take away from it? So if you look at it in this way, inshallah, there is hopefully a lot that you can learn and implement from Surah Yusuf and from any surah in the Quran. Surah Yusuf is just one chapter out of 114, right? So there's much more that we can learn from the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq and to give us success in this life and the next, and to allow us to become people who connect with the Quran, and allow us to reach the month of Ramadan, inshallah, and to bless us in this month of Sha'ban. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So if anyone has any questions, now is your opportunity to ask this time. Anyone have any questions for him?
What inspired you to write the actual book? Like, how did you go about it? Did you just one day wake up, and write a book?
I actually, since I was a kid, I've always been a big bookworm. I've always wanted to become an author. Obviously, when I was a kid, I didn't want to write a book, so I used to want to write a book like Harry Potter, right? Because I was a big Potterhead, I think they call them, right? So I love Harry Potter and all of that stuff. I used to read books, etc. But no, it was actually because I guess it was inspired through my studies of Surah Yusuf. It was something that actually helped me personally in my own life. Many of the lessons to change my own life around. So for me, it was a case of I want to write a book, but I don't want to write like an academic book or tafsir or anything like that. I'm not qualified to write tafsir, but I want to write a book in such a way that, inshallah, we can take the lessons that I personally learned from it. So then it was a challenge in and of itself to pick 40, to sum it down to 40 basically, because there's so many lessons. I could have done 100, but stick to 40 practical life lessons from the surahs. This is where the book comes from. And actually, what's interesting is most of the book, I say more than half the book, I ended up finishing during lockdown. So when the lockdown first hit, that's when obviously everything came to an end for a lot of people. So I was at home, like I don't have much to do, so I might as well finish writing this project that I set off on a few years earlier. Alhamdulillah, within that lockdown, finished the book, published, self-published and everything. And yeah, so like I said, it's more because actually I benefited from it and it changed my life. So if I can share some of the lessons from it. Yeah? Yeah. I think I kind of clarified this question actually, which is, does this mean that simply feeling jealousy would get our deeds eaten up? The Prophet said that Hassan eats away at your deeds. So I think we kind of clarified that with anything, whether it's any of those feelings that we came across, right? Feeling jealousy, feeling love, feeling anger, right? Feeling any emotion is not a bad thing, because remember we said that's what makes you human. It's what you end up doing, right? But if you don't do anything to it, the likelihood is that it's going to grow. If you leave something, you just feel jealous, and you're like, okay, inshallah, it's just a feeling, it'll go away, it'll go away, it'll go away, it'll go away. Then the likelihood is that, eventually it's going to grow and grow and grow. Similarly with attachment, you get attached to something, you leave it untouched, that attachment will grow and grow and grow, right? So no, just feeling something isn't just going to, isn't going to make you sinful. You feel something, no, it's what you end up doing with it. It depends how you remedy it, how you deal with that. And obviously, each one it is a study in and of itself. Each disease of the heart, you need to look at it case by case, because what you can do to deal with jealousy, for example, is different to how you deal with love and attachment. Extreme love and attachment is different to how you deal with anger. It's different to how you deal with insincerity. So each one, inshallah, it requires a study. Why does jealousy affect the person receiving the evil eye, rather than the person who is sinning by feeling the jealous feelings? So it works both ways, of course. Yeah, it works both ways. Number one, yes. Evil eye is a different topic, so we can't go into that right now, right? But yes, it does stem from jealousy, no doubt. A lot of times, this whole evil eye crime, it does stem from jealousy, and it can affect someone, no doubt. And we know this, right? It can affect someone, meaning the recipient, someone who has no idea what's going on. Evil eye or jealousy can affect that person, because that's the power of it. That's the power of it, really, right? Just like okay, let's think of this. Even though it's not literally, don't take it literally, but it's almost like a negative force. Like evil eye or jealousy is like a negative force. Similarly, let me just give you the opposite side. A positive force can also impact you, right? Imagine if somebody said lots of good things about you. Somebody praised you to your face. What would happen to you? Right? Do you think that's it? That person's fine? It's a good thing? No. The likelihood is that you're going to be impacted even by that something good as well. It's going to get to you. Similarly, but not exactly the same, is things like jealousy. It can impact you in a negative way, right? This is where it comes from. So, but don't think that it's not going to impact the one that's doing it as well. Of course it is, because it's a sin, and that's eating away at them as well, and that's going to impact them in a different way. So really, sometimes, not just the person who is being jealous, or the envier, right, is also going to be affected as well as the envied one. Right? Wallahu a'lam. What active steps can we take to refine our character? It's a very broad area and in and of itself a broad question. So a few things that we can do. I mentioned one of them, which is just being in good company. Always helps with refining character. Always. It's just not just because it's proven in the Quran and Sunnah, we know that. But even beyond that, just practically being in good company. And I always say this, by the way, and I emphasize on this point. When I say good company, a lot of times we think of physical company, like you look around you, your friends circle and things, which is, yeah, that's the starting point. But nowadays, for me, company is not just friends or your friend circle. Company is everything that you consume, everything that's in your life, from the things that you listen to the things that you watch, to who you follow on social media. That's all your company as well, because literally it follows you wherever you go. You're on a train, on a bus, you're at university, in a lecture hall, you're in the masjid, it's with you, right there and then. It's in your pocket, literally. That company is in your pocket. It's in your AirPods, it's in your pocket, it's there with you. You can listen to it, you can watch it, you can consume it, you can follow them, you can learn from them. There's so much. That is it. So my point always is, when it comes to even character, don't underestimate what you're watching, who you're listening to, what podcast you're listening to, what person you're taking advice from, which people you're following on social media, what kind of accounts you're following. Trust me, that has an impact on everything that you do as well. So think of company in that manner. Think of company broader than just your friend circle. If you can get that on lock, then that would help a lot with character. Also just seeking knowledge, right? Learning, seeking knowledge always helps with character. Being around, company of learned people, of knowledgeable people, learning from them, seeing what they have to impart. This also helps with refining character. And finally, the third thing and final thing I would say is something which is known as muhasaba. Right? You can never solve a problem if you can't identify it in the first place. If you didn't know there was a problem in the first place, you can never solve the problem. So similarly with refining character, if you know that there's a problem within your character, right, then that's a great starting point, because you know that there's a problem. But if you have no idea that there's a problem to begin with, then you can never resolve it. So the point is that you have to reflect. Self-reflection, muhasaba. Take yourself to account. Right? So think about your progress each day. Even if it's not daily, weekly even, monthly even. Right? Think about where you're headed, what's happening, what good things have you done, what bad things have you done, what negatives are there, what positives are there, where can you improve? Think about these things, right? So inshallah, following these 3 steps is a start, but it's of course it's not limited to that either. Allah Ta'ala.
What should our approach be for those that say, okay, we're going to commit this sin, and afterwards, once we're done, we're going to reform and purify ourselves? Because on the one hand, obviously, that's something we joke about, but on the other hand, Yusuf Hassan's brothers actually did that.
Exactly. That's exactly what they did, right? They said, let's kill him, right? Get rid of him, and وَتَكُونُ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ قَوْمًا صَالِحِينَ. We'll become good people after that, right? So, though you can sometimes get away with it, in the sense, in what sense? You could get away with it in the sense that you could do something bad. You could repent. You could change your life around, and you're just fortunate. Like Yusuf Hassan's brothers, though they had that mindset and they did become good people eventually. But one thing that I always say is that you think about just the way things work. Think about how sins work. Sometimes when you commit a sin, like Yusuf Hassan's brothers, they committed a sin, right? They were envious and they did something bad to their brother. Okay, fine. You could argue they did turn their life around. But what happened within their own lives and within their family's lives? Did it not affect them at all? It completely destroyed their life, and it destroyed the family's life. It destroyed everything around them. Everything came crumbling down, right? So you, by committing a sin and maybe repenting, in Allah's eyes, fine, no problem. Allah can forgive, right? But from the other perspective, the damage is already done. So most people that commit sins, if you speak to someone that's come from a life of complete sin and darkness, speak to them, ask them, now that you've changed things around, is everything okay now? Alhamdulillah, mashallah. They would say, it's good, I feel closer to Allah now, but I can't leave that guilt behind me. I can't leave that life behind me. It still haunts me to this day. So this is what we're saying, is that that's the danger of having that mindset of, I'll change later. I'll go for Hajj when I'm 70, I don't feel ready for Hajj now, even though it's compulsory upon you now, perhaps. Right? I'm not ready to start praying just yet. I'll pray later. The thing is that by the time you get there, number one, are you going to regret it anyway? Is the damage already going to be done? And number two, are you going to get there? Is the question, isn't it? Are you even going to get a chance to repent? What if Allah decides your time comes to an end there and then? So it's a very dangerous mindset. You're playing with something that's not in your control. So may Allah protect us, but yeah, you're right, this is the mindset of the people of Yusuf and brothers. Yep. Are there any language features that give description, a schematic understanding of how Yusuf looked? It's very difficult to us. As far as I'm aware, from my limited understanding, right, there are, I mean, Yusuf first, Yusuf Islam. Literally, apart from Surah Yusuf, there's like one other surah where his name is mentioned in passing. That's it, like Surah Ibrahim, I think it is. Literally, that's it. So, in terms of the Quran, you're not going to find Yusuf Islam mentioned. Right? Maybe you could argue in Surah Baqarah, he's mentioned, referred to all of the children of Yaqub Islam mentioned there. But there's, in the Quran, you don't find anything. In the Quran, you're not going to find descriptions anyway. In the Hadiths, however, there are descriptions of other prophets, but Yusuf Islam, this is, again, as far as I'm aware, I'm happy to be corrected, even the famous Hadith of Isra Mi'raj, Prophet said no more than just the fact that he was handsome. We don't really get much more than that, how he looked, etc. We know Ibrahim Islam, we've given a description, Musa Islam, Isa Islam, we've given some description, but apart from that, we don't have much description of previous prophets. It's very difficult to find that for many of the prophets at all. So Allah knows best exactly how he looked, whatever. Yeah?
I have one question.
Sure.
Is there another surah in the Quran or surah Yusuf that you feel everyone should have studied and take lessons from? Is there another story that stands out?
Good question. I would add Surah Maryam. I would add Surah Maryam. I always say if I was to ever embark on any other project after Surah Yusuf, it would be Surah Maryam. It's one of my favorites. Maybe I'm being biased, maybe just because, but again, in terms of the lessons, and this time it's not specific to one person. Yes, it's about Maryam alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam and their amazing story. But at the beginning it's about Zakaria alayhi salam and Yahya alayhi salam, and later on Allah mentions Ibrahim alayhi salam. So I feel like honestly, that surah is very powerful. And the lessons and things that you can take from there, it's amazing because it's different accounts of different people, of different prophets as well. So yeah, I would say Surah Maryam and Surah Yusuf, and again, they're both stories. And really, stories is what we can learn from them. Because of the lessons and because of the practical nature. It's very difficult to tell someone who is like, for example, just trying to connect to the Quran, read Surah Baqarah, or Surah, Surah Al-Ahzab, or Surah Nisa or something, because it's full of rulings, it's very technical. And you don't want someone that's trying to come closer to Allah, to learn things that are technical or legalistic in nature, because they're going to struggle to even understand the basics. So you want to start with stories, like kids always start with stories. You want to start with, okay, learn the story and relate to them, and learn lessons from the story. So it's really nice, that's why Surah Yusuf and Surah Maryam and Surah Yasin and these surahs, people love it, because it's very relatable. And a lot of us are just trying to get closer to Allah, and we can get closer to Allah through these stories, inshallah. Yeah?
Does anyone have any other questions?
No?
Okay.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair everyone for turning out today. May Allah reward Ustad Shabbir for his brilliant speech. And may we all take some benefit from it, inshallah. Just one final thing. As we all know, Ramadan is fast approaching, as Ustad mentioned earlier on. And it's a time we can use to improve our relationship with the Quran. And I think we should start that process before Ramadan, before we even reach the month of Ramadan. So the ISOC, we have our own Quran classes, inshallah, and we can use this time now to just develop ourselves, develop our relationship with the Quran. And it's open to everyone, whether you're still on Alif Bata or whether you're doing your memorization. So we encourage everyone to come down, inshallah. It's 5 p.m. in the Brothers and Sisters Prayer on Fridays, inshallah.
No, so I've got some copies of my book here today. If anybody does want to purchase, I've got card payments, everything except contactless, all of that except if you do want to get a copy, you can do so before leaving, inshallah. I'll be here for a few more minutes. Jazakallah khair for inviting me. Huge pleasure and honor as always. Thank you everyone for taking your time out, for being here, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Assalamu alaikum.